We interrupt your program with a CBS News Bulletin. Here's anchor, Mr. Wade Trosclair. This is Wade Trosclair, CBS Newsroom. News flash from Sarajevo, Bosnia. The flash apparently official. Archduke Franz Ferdinand died at about 10:45 a.m. Local time, about 38 minutes ago. Emperor Franz Josef is at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna and is expected to make a statement, but we don't know when. Long live the Habsburgs, long live the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And now back to your regularly scheduled program. That announcement is very similar to what Walter Cronkite issued on the CBS News back on November 22nd, 1963. Earlier that day, John F. Kennedy, U.S. president, had been shot in Dallas by the assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, who's actually from New Orleans. And while people were watching TV or having a normal day, and next thing you know, this shocking news breaks that the President of the United States has been shot and killed in Dallas. And of course, was a lot of speculation. Still, people have all sorts of conspiracy theories about who was behind the assassination. But kind of thinking back, if you're familiar with this assassination and the story, but thinking back to 1963, this kind of moment in American history was very similar to what happened in Austria in particular, Europe more generally, in June of 1914, when we had the assassination of the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so I use that as our way to get into today, in this video, the newest topic, and that is 1914, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And so the event that launches World War I, and especially the response to it, which I'll get into in the next video, but this is the assassination that launches the First World War, and arguably, kind of if you look back after the 20th century, you can kind of trace back pretty much everything that's happened in the 20th century back to this assassination, this moment. Again, World War I is going to spark World War II. World War II is going to spark the Cold War. And so you can arguably say that this assassination leads to many of the developments of the 20th century. And so let's get into the assassination. And so as I mentioned in my last video, again, there's a context to this. There's a reason why it's happening. It's not happening in some sort of bubble. Well, 1908, again, Serbian nationalists, ultimately, they want Bosnia. They want all of these different places where there are Serbs. Again, back to nationalism and looking to create a Serbian nation state. And well, in 1908, Austria seizes and annexes officially Bosnia. So it seems like perhaps that Serbian nationalist dream is over. People rallying here in the capital of Belgrade, protesting Austria's annexation. And as I mentioned last time, Serbia turns to Russia. Russia threatens Austria. Germany helps Austria by threatening Russia. Russia backs down. We're going to see that pattern in the next video as the response takes shape. We then had the Balkan Wars, and so once again, the Balkans is our hotspot here. A lot of political instability, a lot of different nationalist tensions, and ultimately, once again, Serbia is blocked in its ambitions by Austria, with now Albania being created, blocking Serbian access to the sea. And so Serbian nationalists hate Austria. And so now in 1914, we have sort of a third Balkan crisis, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which is now going to spin into a general European war and a world war. And so let's go back to why we have this guy to begin with and who he is. And so we established way back in 1848 a new Austrian emperor, Franz Josef, again, Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary. And so we have here Franz Josef reigning for a long time, going back to the Revolution of 1848. Again, our Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. And well, there's been a lot of Habsburg family drama in the past several decades by 1914. I mentioned previously, if you go to the Habsburg crypt underneath the Capuchin Church in Vienna, you can see the tombs and the sarcophagi of all of the past Habsburgs dating back for centuries, their family tomb. And you have here on the left there, a little above, the tomb of Franz Ferdinand. It's going to be Franz Josef, who's going to die during World War I in 1916. And on either side of Franz Josef's coffin, those are the coffins of his wife and his only son. And so I've mentioned his wife before, Empress Elizabeth Sisi, originally born in Bavaria, married to Franz Josef, and well, she didn't really get along with her husband. She really looked to kind of get out of Vienna. She didn't really get along with him. She didn't really like Viennese court life and all the rituals that was associated with the Habsburg court. And so she liked to travel. She liked going to Hungary. Again, she didn't like being underneath her husband's thumb. The Hungarians didn't like being underneath her husband's thumb. And so while traveling one day in 1898 in Switzerland, in Geneva, she's assassinated by an Italian anarchist. Remember, those anarchists wanting to rid the world of sort of all these institutions like the state, etc., so that people can be free. And he was actually looking for another royal that day who had left town. And well, it's known that she was there, and he kills her instead. And so Franz Josef loses his wife in 1898, and he actually lost his only son years before. And so in 1889, we have the death of Crown Prince Rudolf. Crown Prince Rudolf, Franz Josef's only son, married some years previously to Princess Stephanie of Belgium. Not a happy marriage here either. Again, it was a marriage like a political alliance, as we've seen before throughout history. And well, Crown Prince Rudolf just was not a happy person. He was often depressed. He didn't get along with his father, who was very conservative. Crown Prince Rudolf is a little more liberal. And well, not getting along with his wife, he ultimately also started finding mistresses. And one mistress in particular, while he was about 30 years old, she was about 17 years old, the Baroness Mary Vetzero, kind of low-ranking noble. And well, they fall madly in love, and months later, it's apparent that something's gone wrong. And while Habsburg's officials head over to what's called the Meyerling Hunting Lodge here, outside of Vienna, and well, they find that both Mary and the Crown Prince are dead, and the mystery begins. And what basically has happened, or what happened in 1889, was this simply known as the Meyerling incident. But Crown Prince Rudolf, it seems that he got Mary to go along with a murder-suicide pact. He, sort of like, we can't be in love together in this life, let's go and be love in the next life. And so it seems that, based on the evidence, that he shot Mary, and then he shot himself. And for years, there's also been a lot of mysteries and controversies around this story. And just actually some years ago, in 2015, Mary's letters were actually found that she had written to her mother at Meyerling, and basically they ended up in a bank in Vienna in 1926, and they were only discovered in 2015. The kind of and it seems to kind of give more evidence that Mary clearly went along with this sort of murder-suicide pact based on love. She wrote to her mother, "Please forgive me for what I have done. I could not resist love." And well, once it's found out, this becomes a huge scandal for the Habsburgs as news becomes known. And today, the Meyerling, or after the Meyerling incident, the hunting lodge was actually turned into a convent where nuns could pray for the soul of Crown Prince Rudolf. But the Habsburgs really wanted to kind of, get this story out of the papers as much as possible. And so, ultimately, here's another big blow for Franz Josef before the death of his wife. You have the Crown Prince there laying in state. And so with that, there's been a lot of Habsburg drama, and well, with Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne, the next in line after Franz Josef dead, that means, if Crown Prince Rudolf is dead, the heir to the throne now is Franz Ferdinand. And so Franz Ferdinand was a nephew of Franz Josef, the emperor. So it's basically his brother's son, basically. And so by 1914, Franz Ferdinand, another Habsburg nephew of Franz Josef, our new heir to the throne, our new crown prince, basically. And so if you notice, he loved hunting. I've been to his palace just outside of just outside of Prague. What was then Bohemia, today the Czech Republic, a little palace castle called Konopište, and we weren't allowed to take pictures while on a tour, but while going around the house, there are just antlers and taxidermy animals like everywhere. Franz Ferdinand was a huge fan of hunting. It's estimated he killed like hundreds of thousands of animals in his life. He traveled around the world killing tigers and elephants and all sorts of stuff. But as a sort of political figure in Vienna, He was a conservative, but again, he was very loud and outspoken. Again, he was kind of raising some alarms that maybe we should change some things in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The empire seems to be kind of falling apart. We should make some big changes. But again, his uncle Franz Joseph really didn't want to meddle with the things. Franz Joseph didn't want to rock the boat. Franz Ferdinand did. And Franz Ferdinand was even kind of a fan of getting rid of the dual monarchy, getting rid of Austria-Hungary. And instead, as I mentioned in a previous video, he was a big fan of trying to do something like, get rid of the Hungarian half of the monarchy and create sort of a United States of Austria. So give the Czechs a state, give the Poles a state, give the Romanians a state. Again, he was not a fan of Hungarians. He hated the Hungarians. He thought they were basically the ones kind of holding the empire back. And so ultimately, this plan goes nowhere, but with that, he becomes a major political figure by 1914, as especially the next in line for the throne. And speaking of Habsburg family drama, his wife is named Sophie. Sophie, his wife, was a very low-ranking noble. Sophie Chotek, when she marries Franz Ferdinand, she eventually gains the title of Duchess of Hohenberg. But for a Habsburg, the family said, no, Franz Ferdinand, you shouldn't marry somebody who's that low-ranking. And they're noble, sure, but no, you're a Habsburg. You're supposed to marry into one of the other big royal families in Europe, not some lowly Czech noble, basically. And well, Franz Ferdinand, here's a situation where he's not going to marry out of politics and have some sort of woman on the side. No, he really genuinely falls in love with Sophie. She falls in love with him. They want to marry. They want to be together. And ultimately, the Emperor Franz Joseph says, look, nephew Franz Ferdinand, the family does not agree with this at all. But if you want to be married to Sophie, you need to promise that the children of that marriage, of your marriage with her, will not be able to inherit the titles and the palaces, and they basically kind of cut out the picture legally. Franz Ferdinand's sons would not be able to become the emperor after him. And so with that, he eventually marries Sophie. As you see there, he has 3 children, a daughter named Sophie, 2 boys, Maximilian and Ernst. But Sophie is very much not really treated with respect in the Habsburg court. Again, she's not invited to parties. There's all these sort of protocol and ritual. The husbands and wives would sit together, but again, she's not even often invited. If she can even sit near him, she can't sit near him. She has to sit kind of far away. So again, she just feels out of place. She doesn't like Vienna. It's too stuffy. She's not respected. And well, in June of 1914, Franz Ferdinand's got some news for her. Hey, Sophie, it's going to be our 14th wedding anniversary, and well, why don't you come with me to my next assignment? The emperor wants me to do a special task, and well, Franz Ferdinand was technically the inspector of the army, so he was there. His job was to kind of go and make sure the army was in shape. And well, in 1914, in June, he was going to go down to Sarajevo, Bosnia. And so, come on, honey, let's go to Sarajevo, Bosnia. I got to go down there. I got to do some work. I got to, inspect the troops. I have to say hello. Again, this is Austria's newest province. And so I'm going to go kind of show Habsburg imperial authority, etc., etc. But why don't you come with me? Because, well, if Sophie's with him there, this is outside of Vienna. She can attend all the functions. She can actually be by his side. And so they have a very happy marriage together. They had a loving, happy family. But again, in public, they couldn't really be together. And so let's go to Sarajevo. And so they head down to Sarajevo. They get there, photograph of them exiting the train, getting into a car there. And well, it's time for some events on June 28th. And so their goal is to head down to the city hall of Sarajevo, shown there. I'll show more pictures of it going forward. But along the route, so again, people are lined up. There's a motorcade. There's a bunch of cars, much like in Dallas in 1963. And well, there are several assassins lined up along the road to the city hall as part of this greater secret plot. And really, the main character here is a young man named Gavrilo Princip. Gavrilo Princip, kind of like maybe perhaps a Lee Harvey Oswald figure, if you want to kind of compare the assassinations. But Gavrilo Princip was a young Bosnian Serb. And so as a young Bosnian Serb, again, he's Serbian living in Bosnia. And so again, as a Serbian living in Bosnia, he's also a Serbian nationalist. And well, I want Bosnia, where I live and all the Serbs here, to be part of the Serbian kingdom. And well, clearly, the Habsburgs, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, is in the way of that. And so Gavrilo Princip has been recruited by an organization that is basically sponsoring this assassination plot. And well, Gavrilo Princip has been recruited by an organization known unofficially as the Black Hand, but its official name was Unity or Death. And so, again, the idea here being unity of the Serbian nation under one nation state or death. And so I would define it as a Serbian nationalist terrorist organization. It's a Serbian nationalist terrorist organization. They're willing to use violence and murder to achieve their goal, and their goal ultimately is to help establish a Serbian nation state. So this is a secret society too. So this is not, and this one I'll make sure students understand, it's not an official Serbian government organization. No, it's a secret society. But the leaders of the Black Hand are members of the government. And specifically, the leader of the Black Hand in 1914 is this guy over here, Dragutin Dmitrievich, the chief of Serbian military intelligence. And so he's the guy in the Serbian military who's in charge of making sure, they have intelligence in other countries, other armies. He's played a big role in recent Serbian history. He actually took part in a coup in 1903 that actually ended up with the king and queen then being murdered. And so this guy has been working behind the scenes, being very violent, working as the leader now as the secret organization. And while he and his associates that are part of the Black Hand will recruit Gavrilo Princip and some other young Bosnian Serbs, give them weapons, train them, and ultimately try to help them assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, with the goal essentially being of, look, let's take out the next in line for the Austro-Hungarian throne, the free Bosnia from those Austrians. And so with that, Dragutin Dmitrievich is over in Belgrade. And well, when I was a student at Jesuit, my Western Civ teacher was African American, and I only mention that fact because something that his students never forgot is when he got to this point in Western Civ, he would say that Gavrilo Princip was murdered by the, and he'd hold up his hand like this, and students would be like, what are you doing? And he'd go, the Black Hand. And so if you get it, again, I can't do the joke the same way, but ultimately, it's why students often remember Gavrilo Princip was recruited and was working for the Black Hand, unity or death. Let's take out the Archduke and try to establish a Serbian nation state through terror, essentially. And so, with that, the conspirators line up along the road there. The motorcade is on its way in June 28th, 1914. And so, and I've created some animation here to kind of help show this year. If you see the little car there, so the car is making its way down the street towards the city hall. And as the car is going by, another assassin here. So again, the idea was if we have a bunch of assassins, in case one guy chickens out or fails, there are other assassins who can back him up and do the deed. And well, a couple of assassins fail, but over here you have a guy named, last name Kabrinovich. Kabrinovich actually throws a bomb. The bomb bounces off the Archduke's car, and when it hits the ground, it ends up rolling in the next car behind the Archduke's car. The next car, it blows up underneath that one. And so with that, there's an explosion, kaboom. The Archduke turns around. Everyone's like, what's going on? And well, the driver of the Archduke's car slams on the gas and actually speeds right past Princip. So Princip never really got even a chance to take a shot at the Archduke, because all of a sudden now, he thought perhaps, the bomb killed the Archduke, someone else did, and next he sees the Archduke sort of like whizzing by. And so the Archduke gets to the town hall here, and well, he gets out the car. It's a photograph from when he got out. So again, he's pretty shaken. Again, he just survived at the moment an assassination attempt. There's a lot of confusion and caution and chaos. But again, let's continue on with the program. And well, the mayor of Sarajevo delivers the official greeting to Franz Ferdinand and Sophie. So Sophie was sitting in the car with him. And well, the mayor's kind of reading his speech and giving Sarajevo welcomes you with open arms and love. And Franz Ferdinand, who's just like shaken up, he's like, what? He just kind of blurts out, like, what are you talking about? Like, they're throwing bombs at me. How can you be so like, oh yeah, the city. And Sophie's like, all right, dear, like, calm down, just let him do his job. And so Franz Ferdinand calms down, the mayor finishes his speech. Again, they have some other sort of like reception, basically. And now what Franz Ferdinand wants is not to continue with the day's program. He wants to go to the hospital. Not because he's injured, but because the guys who were injured behind him in the car where the bomb blew up, he wants to make sure those guys are okay and pay them a visit. And so now he wants to go to the hospital. And well, this now starts to cause some confusion. And so here's the last photograph in black and white and colored of Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, and Franz Ferdinand making their way to the car. And it's the last photograph of them taken alive. Because there's a bit of a mix-up. Again, there's been a lot of chaos, and actually the guys who were injured in the car behind them with the bomb, those guys were part of like the logistics detail. They were staff members. And so the governor of Bosnia, Oskar Potiorek, says, look, I'm going to accompany the crown, or the Archduke Franz Ferdinand here. We're gonna head to the hospital, and here's how we're gonna do it. But like, those instructions never got to the drivers of the motorcade. And so with that, Leopold Ljoka there, the driver, begins to drive back the way they came. And while he's driving the car, he's got the governor of Bosnia with him in the passenger seat. He's got Sophie and Franz Ferdinand in the back seat. And well, according to the original route, which he was expecting to take and other drivers before him took, the goal was to ultimately turn right. And well, he turns right, and all of a sudden, the governor of Bosnia starts hitting him, like saying, like, no, like, and yelling, no, we're going the other way. Don't go this way. We gotta go the other way. And so as the driver begins to stops the car, as he begins to put the car in reverse, who is right there but Gavrilo Princip? And so Gavrilo Princip was just kind of, literally, you'll see where this guy in white here is. He's literally just kind of hanging out on the corner, and the people he was the guy, Franz Ferdinand, he was supposed to assassinate, boom, there he is, just turned the corner, and he stopped. And so Princip takes out his pistol, he fires 2 shots, he's only a few steps away from the car. And well, with that, notice these images here showing Sophie and Franz Ferdinand together. They're kind of dramatic. She's standing up. Those are drawings done later that actually didn't happen. But what happened was, when Princip shot, he shot Sophie in the abdomen, in the belly. She fell over into her husband's lap. And then Franz Ferdinand was shot in the neck. And so all of a sudden, the governor of Bosnia is like, what, Potiorek's like, what's going on here? Franz Ferdinand's bleeding profusely from the neck. And well, according to the report, or the story, his last words were, Sophie, Sophie, stay alive for the children. But by that point, Sophie had already died from blood loss. And eventually he too will die from blood loss. And so with that, all of a sudden now, boom, Franz Ferdinand is shot and killed on the streets of Sarajevo. And when you go to Vienna one day, and again, you go to Bosnia, I haven't been to Sarajevo myself, but you can see the spot there. But when you go to Vienna, at the Austrian Military Museum, you actually have the car Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were killed in. And now the Military Museum also has the gun, and the Military Museum also has the uniform that Franz Ferdinand was wearing. It still has, if you notice there, on the chest there, it still has stains from the blood that spilled out. And that's where you see me there, young Mr. Trosclair, back in 2008, I believe, pictured there. That's my picture by the car and the uniform. And so ultimately, again, news spreads pretty quickly that the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne has been shot in Sarajevo. All of a sudden now, there are police roundups of Serbians and suspects in Sarajevo. There were actually anti-Serbian riots. Croatians and Bosnian Muslims in Sarajevo and Germans basically just went around and like attacked Serbs and Serbian businesses. If you notice this photograph here, this one's often shown to be sort of Princip being arrested, but that's not Princip in the end. But again, someone else is being arrested, again, being brought in for questioning. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie will have a very sort of private funeral. They're not going to be buried in the Habsburg crypt in Vienna. They're buried somewhere outside of Vienna in Austria. But their tombs there. Eventually, Princip will go on trial, and he'll say, like, he really did feel bad, actually, for shooting Sophie. He wasn't aiming for Sophie. As he said, he was actually aiming for Potiorek, the governor of Bosnia, but he happened to miss and shot Sophie. So he felt guilty for that, but he did not feel guilty for shooting Franz Ferdinand in the end. His goal was to liberate Serbians in Bosnia so they could be part of a Serbian nation state. And well, when Princip was arrested and he was, when he committed the crime, he wasn't 20 years old yet. He was 19 years old. And so under Austrian law, he couldn't be sentenced to death. He was sentenced ultimately to a 20-year term in prison. And so here you see Princip with other conspirators at the trial. Here is Princip when he is in prison, and he'll actually die several months before the end of World War I in 1918 in his prison cell from tuberculosis in a prison in northern Bohemia, what is today the Czech Republic. And so with that, again, the Austrian government wants to figure out what happened here. They launch an investigation. All throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire, newspapers, whether it's in Czech or Hungarian or Polish and German, they're all publishing all these papers talking about the assassination. And even the one I'm kind of standing in front of here, again, that one, some of the papers like to kind of show the children. You know, think of the children. They lost both their mother and father. And so with that, an assassination very much like the Kennedy assassination that really frightens the country. And all these questions will rise of who's behind this, what's going on. And especially the question is, what do we do next? And with that, our song of the day here is All For You, Sophia by a band called Franz Ferdinand. And again, the song name, the song itself, all dealing with the assassination. Franz Ferdinand, the band, literally named after Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But if you notice one of the lines in the song there, bang, bang, Europe is going to weep. And well, as a result of this assassination, we're going to have the First World War. But again, there's going to be a lot of decisions made between then and the firing of the first shots. And with that, we'll pick up with that in the next video, in which we will have the response to the assassination.